This past week, was a week of anniversaries. It was the centennial of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, President of the United States, of course, tragically assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. Kennedy's memory is beloved, especially among Democrats. He exemplified the youth energy and promise of the World War II generation, which of course was a young generation at the time of his presidency. 43 years old when he was elected, I believe 46 years old when he died. John F. Kennedy, in many ways considered a paragon of liberal politics. He had an interesting and complicated career. In some ways, what we would call a progressive today, but then in some ways Dwight D. Eisenhower, his Republican predecessor, was also considered a progressive. Now, Kennedy made his name in the 1950s when he was first elected to the United States Senate by speaking out in favor of the revolutionary independence movement in Algeria. Kind of a bold thing to do, and he said he eventually became famous for saying that those who make peaceful evolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Pretty progressive thing to say for his time. Like all mainstream politicians of his era, he was fervently anti-communist, fervently anti-socialist. He was also quite a bit of a war hawk in certain ways. So he was certainly an aggressive Cold Warrior. His debates with Richard Nixon were shining examples of Cold Warrior posturing on both candidates' parts, including an exaggerated presentation of the Soviet Union's military capabilities. At the time, JFK was initially reluctant to press too hard on the civil rights issue because he understood that doing so would cost the Democratic Party its support, which was largely white support in the white racist South of the time. Eventually, however, before his death, he did commit himself to the civil rights struggle, which was a courageous thing for him to do. Lyndon Johnson ultimately completed that effort. So we do have many progressive milestones in the JFK presidency. So again, worth noting, the centennial of John Fitzgerald Kennedy this week was not the only anniversary. However, we also are told that this week marked the 90-year anniversary of the arrest of Donald Trump's father at a Ku Klux Klan rally 90 years ago. Last week, Fred C. Trump, the president's father, was arrested during what the New York Times described as a series of clashes between the KKK and a group they despised, Catholics, particularly what the Klan characterized as New York City's Catholic police force, by which I presumably they mean many of the Irish members of the New York City police force. At the time, Trump's father was arrested and released by police. Newspaper reports said Fred Trump of 17524 Devonshire Road, Jamaica, was discharged. Now, the 1927 article in giving the address nailed it down. This is Trump's father we are talking about. Now, according to the New York Post at the time, a flyer passed around the neighborhood ahead of the Klan rally described why they felt a rally was needed. Native-born Protestant Americans were being assaulted by Roman Catholic police of New York City, according to that leaflet. Liberty and democracy have been trampled upon when native-born Protestant Americans dare to organize to protect one flag, the American flag, one school, the public school, and one language, the English language. Well, you know, the more things change, the more things stay the same. We're still seeing that anti-immigrant hatred today directed against other groups, but with much of the same rhetoric. And I guess the President of the United States is a chip off the old block.